You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding. I don't talk in real life about having hoarding disorder, so I talk about it on this podcast instead. And because I'm anonymous, I can talk really, really honestly. Subscribe to the podcast and find my social media links, episode transcripts, and every link that I mention at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. Finally, I am not a doctor. I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. So I am here with Dr Jan Eppingstall. Jan is a therapist. She specialises in working with people who hoard in Melbourne, Australia. Jan, how are you?
I'm grand, thank you. I'm grand.
Glad to hear it.
Just trying that out.
I love it. I love to hear it. Today, we are talking about uncertainty, why it can be so hard to deal with, and also what is the connection to hoarding and uncertainty. I feel like there are parallels with something we've talked about before, or I've talked about before, about distress tolerance, being able to tolerate distress, but there are parallels, but it's not the same thing. So let's talk in general first. Jan, why is uncertainty so unsettling for a lot of people to tolerate?
I really think this is a super topical point right now with everything that's going on in the world, but it's not new.
Yeah, we just know about more of it.
We just know about more of what's going on, right? So it seems like things are more uncertain. It's just knowledge. But I think what is uncertain might be different, but why we're intolerant of it as a species is evolutionary. So the selfish brain theory helps us explain why uncertainty feels so uncomfortable to us. This theory suggests that our brains are literally wired to avoid expending extra energy to process ambiguous or uncertain situations. And this was originally a smart evolutionary adaptation when food was scarce. We need to conserve mental energy when, resources are limited. And that made survival sense for the human race. So this theory provides insight into why people often struggle with uncertainty and engage in behaviours like hoarding that seem on the surface to reduce uncertainty in the moment, but then bring about other problems in our resource-abundant modern world. I think that's key. We're now no longer struggling to find resources, but our minds are still behaving in that way.
So there is an interview online that I will link to in the show notes, along with all the papers and everything that we mention, with a woman called Elizabeth Weingarten. And she said individuals vary in their need for cognitive closure, which is a concept coined by the psychologist Ari Kruglansky in the early 1990s. And he, along with other researchers, created a scale to help people measure their desire for answers and their ease in the unknown. And found that basically our need for that cognitive closure is influenced by a range of factors that include personality and experiences of trauma. So, two-parter, at least, question here. Can you first of all explain cognitive closure? Like, we hear the term closure a lot, don't we? Is it the same as what people talk about? And also, what are these kinds of factors that can affect how much we need that cognitive closure, and how might they influence how well we deal with uncertainty?
So much there. Let's unpack that.
I feel like if there was a drinking game for this podcast, one of them would be a question that Hoarder writes that seems reasonable on paper until she says it out loud.
Exactly. I would be blind. I'll be blind.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And another would be when Jan says more research is needed.
Yep, exactly. I mean, cognitive closure refers to an individual's desire for definitive answers.
Okay.
And discomfort with ambiguity. So it's different from closure in pop culture, which is really about emotional resolution.
Yeah, like the end of a relationship or, yeah.
Breakup, death, trauma, that kind of stuff. Getting answers or explanations that help you, in inverted commas, move on. A sense of completeness or finality that allows healing. I mean, it's usually about processing past events and finding peace with them. It's not measurable as it doesn't have a clear definition, and nor do many people believe it can be achieved. I mean, everyone, when something terrible happens and they interview the family, and, some journalists ask them, will this give you closure? And they say, nothing will ever give us closure. And it's just it's a size circle. So that's sort of what pop culture, but cognitive closure from the research is referring to an ongoing psychological need for certainty and definitive answers. So that discomfort with ambiguity in general, not just past events, and kind of a personality trait about how you handle uncertainty in daily life. It's much more about that present and future decision making than past resolutions. And it's measurable, These guys have created a measure, as everyone does, and everyone wants to create a measure as a researcher because then you get referenced constantly.
The Eppingstall scale.
I have created a measure.
I have invented a maneuver.
That's exactly right. But yeah, it's that pop culture is looking backwards. Cognitive closure is forward looking and being certain about decisions. So the factors, the second part, let's move on to part 2 of giant question. The factors that research has identified as influencing our need for cognitive closure are certain personality traits. So conscientiousness, one of the big 5 personality traits, is where you've got that preference for structure, clear outcomes. Yes, you've got your finger point. Yeah, me too. I'm very high on conscientiousness. Clear outcomes, order and planning. We like that. So we feel we need to know what's going to happen. Emotionality, which isn't a shock, formerly known as neuroticism, again, a tendency to seek to reduce stress and anxiety because
who doesn't seek to reduce stress though? Oh, I guess
the crazies,
like the
extroverts,
bungee jumping people, yeah.
The openness to experience, yeah. So those so neuroticism and conscientiousness are about, gosh, I need this closure to know where I'm going and what I'm doing. But openness to experience, there's that willingness to see ambiguity as an opportunity, for creativity and being wacky and keep your options open, all that kind of stuff.
That relates a bit. We were talking before the call that I'm trying to do better at being spontaneous, and that feels kind of relevant to that kind of open to experience rather than planning everything to death.
Yes, and let's see how it goes, see what happens. And extroverts are the same. They're more comfortable with that collaborative and iterative decision-making, aren't they? I'll decide to do this, and then I'll see where that takes me, and then which freaks some people out. I mean, I'm getting better at it in my old age, but it is a bit scary.
I'm variable with that. Sometimes not having a plan is nice. Sometimes not having a plan is baffling. Let's meet and then we'll decide where to eat.
But the research also mentions trauma histories, as we were saying earlier, that influences our need for cognitive closure. And this makes sense from a safety system perspective because, our nervous system is constantly scanning our environment for danger and life threat. And feeling uncomfortable about something that's uncertain will shut down our connection to that prefrontal cortex where decisions and plans are made. So that's going to shut us down and not allow us to actually achieve cognitive closure. And I also wanted to just quickly mention autism and neurodivergence as another factor that may impact someone's need for cognitive closure, although the research in that area is a bit nuanced. They do, individuals with autism exhibit higher intolerance of uncertainty. compared to neurotypicals or allistic individuals. So they experience significant distress and anxiety in response to unpredictable or ambiguous situations. However, the relationship with autism and need for closure is a little bit more complex. There's this push-pull. So they may seek certainty but struggle with decision making to actually achieve closure. So there's this push-pull of that. So a preference for predictability over decision-making and sticky thinking, which is reduced cognitive flexibility. It's just a fun way to talk about, being able to shift and change with your thought patterns, means they tend to get stuck on ideas or solutions and then have trouble adapting to new information. And that's stuff that we're kind of much more aware of.
So as you're talking, something else I'm thinking of is there are those there's personality, there's trauma, there's neurodivergence. What I was thinking as you were talking was also there are neurodivergent people with trauma and that personality type, or, those things can combine for sure.
Yes, definitely. And whenever I think about cognitive closure, I keep thinking about that episode on The Big Bang Theory where Sheldon just couldn't cope with the fact that they didn't have the final episode of a show, and he had some sort of existential meltdown. And sometimes I see that with people. I feel it myself. Like, I just need to know, even if it's not a good outcome, I just want to know what's going to happen. And so if you've got all of that piled on top of one another, and maybe something's going on for you right at the moment, the need to feel certain is heightened.
Yes, I have a friend who is very into jigsaws and spent literally weeks on a jigsaw that ended up without a final piece and lost his mind.
Yeah. Oh my God, I'm feeling that viscerally.
You can't I haven't done a jigsaw for 20 years, but I can feel his pain. So there is a phrase that came up in a lot of the studies I read when preparing for this episode, and that's going to come up in the rest of our conversation, and that is intolerance of uncertainty. So what is, in terms of the psychological studies and theories, what is intolerance of uncertainty?
So to quote the 2022 Hillman article that looks at the roles of intolerance of uncertainty in hoarding, it's defined as a negative cognitive bias, there's those little buggers again, that affects how a person perceives, interprets, and responds to uncertain situations on cognitive, emotional, and behavioural levels. More specifically, those who are high in intolerance of uncertainty, they will experience uncertainty about the future as stressful and upsetting, which results in impairment in functioning and subsequent avoidance. Very, very, very applicable to hoarding. It just feels like that definition is just like screaming hoarding to me.
I read in a number of studies when I was preparing for this conversation that intolerance of uncertainty was associated with hoarding symptoms that had been found again and again. And what was interesting was that was the case whether or not people in the studies had other mental health problems as well. So it showed up when somebody just had hoarding, but not depression or anxiety or whatever else. So what might this link be between hoarding disorder and intolerance of uncertainty?
Just continuing on from that, of what you were just saying there, the research to date indicates that intolerance or uncertainty is a significant predictor of hoarding symptom severity. So as you said, after controlling for all these other things like general worry, depression, obsessive compulsive symptoms, so this makes it extremely useful in early intervention. If we can have a look at whether someone has these thoughts about needing certainty in the future, then we can actually look at intervening earlier. We're not doing that at the moment, but this is an area that would be definitely worth researching and creating more interventions to focus in on it. Because I think that the interventions kind of do it, but they're not really targeting it in a way that I think would bring about change. So this has opened up a whole lot of stuff for me as well, doing this podcast. There's a whole lot of things that I think I might change in the way I approach it. But intolerance of uncertainty is actually increasingly recognised as a transdiagnostic factor, which means it's implicated across multiple mental health diagnoses, particularly a range of anxiety disorders and, to a lesser extent, depression. And this makes sense, right? Because that's what anxiety is all about. You know, when we're intolerant of uncertainty, we become stressed and anxious when faced with decisions, even simple ones. And people who hoard are more sensitive to anxiety. It's the other part of the research that dovetails with this. That is that they rate their level of anxiety to be higher in ambiguous situations than healthy controls. Enter the avoidance mechanism. You know, in my research, I found that experiential avoidance was extremely high, and hoarding behaviours, both saving and acquiring, offer ways to reduce the distress related to uncertainty. So intolerance of uncertainty is central to the perpetuation of maladaptive behaviours in hoarding. It's just kind of the core of it.
If you want to get even more from me, I have a weekly newsletter that goes out to email subscribers. As a bonus, when you sign up, you get a printable version of a series of questions to help you make decisions when you're dehoarding. Sign up for all of that for free at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/newsletter. And as I was doing the reading, there was a topic that had come up a few times in the dehoarding accountability Zoom sessions I run that felt very relevant. And that was people talking about being afraid of making a mistake, whether that was getting rid of something and that being a mistake, or not acquiring something, or that kind of thing. Even putting something in the wrong place, which is a very solvable mistake. But there's a big overriding fear of making a mistake that people were talking about. So, and then I was writing these questions, and it really struck me that there must be a link between uncertainty and fear of making a mistake. What do you reckon?
Yeah. Perfectionism, enter stage left. You know, like perfectionism's core, like it's a fear of failure. And while intolerance of uncertainty involves the fear of making errors about it, you know, items' future utility, perfectionism in hoarding often involves like demanding standards about not wasting anything. This is all these, which is a mistake that we're trying to avoid every day. Fear of throwing out something that might be needed later. All or nothing thinking. I can't waste resources at all, ever. And rigid rules around what constitutes proper decision making. I'm so often asked by clients and people just in the general population, they ask if I can teach them how to make decisions. However, what they really want to know is how to not make mistakes.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of have to, really. But, you know, the intolerance of uncertainty kind of specifically relates to hoarding through the fear of making mistakes about future utility of items, you know, and just that whole I'm uncertain about outcomes. I don't know what's happening in my life.
I might regret it.
I might regret it, you know. And there's that using of hoarding behaviours to avoid uncertainty-related distress, and then becoming kind of paralysed in the face of ambiguity, kind of not sure what's going to happen. I just won't act. That's the easiest and simplest way to stop the distress and come up with a better solution, I guess, of how to manage it. Maybe an act of God will occur and I won't have to make the decision, yeah?
I sometimes find it useful to remind myself that choosing not to make the decision may be the mistake.
Yes.
And that if I want to avoid making a mistake.
And actually putting it that way is brilliant, right? Because I would have said not making a decision is a decision in and of itself.
And
it is. But you saying not making the decision might be the mistake
Yeah.
is even more powerful. I
I
love
have my
that.
moments.
I love that. I love that. I really like that because it just brings it home.
Yeah.
There's this reinforcing cycle, the two factors,
Yeah.
perfectionism and uncertainty, intolerance, is kind of, they reinforce each other. So uncertainty triggers perfectionistic thinking. What if I need this later? Leads to, I must not make the mistake of discarding it. And then perfectionistic standards increase uncertainty. The demand to make the perfect decision about each and every item creates more uncertainty about what the right choice is. And then avoidance is the solution. Rather than risk it, rather than making an imperfect decision, you just avoid it altogether. But you're right, it could be not making a decision is the mistake. Definitely.
Interestingly, there is a link that people who have the most difficulty tolerating uncertainty might also have the most severe hoarding symptoms, and that it's worse when there's more than one mental health problem. And that sounds kind of logical based on what we've said, but it's interesting that the research has found that as well, right?
Yeah. And before I start on the why, I just want to make a couple of points about multiple diagnoses, because research shows more than half of people diagnosed with one psychiatric disorder will be diagnosed with a second or a third in their lifetime, and about a third will have 4 or more diagnoses. You can argue about why that is. I mean, the high rate of comorbidity is partially due to like overlapping genetic risk factors among certain disorders, but it also could be related to that overlap of symptoms and signs in the diagnostic criteria in the DSM, right? I mean, I won't bang on about that again, but
I had a long period where psychiatrists could not work out what I had a different diagnosis with every different psychiatrist because they could, and then eventually somebody went, "This is obviously PTSD," and everybody else went, "Oh yeah, it's obviously PTSD," and everybody agreed. And but I also have a diagnosis of OCD that stands, and other things, and so yeah, absolutely. But I also went through a number of diagnoses that were not accurate or correct, but they just didn't quite know which box to put me in.
exactly.
And each decided on a different one
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
until finally someone was like, uh.
duh. Oh, wow. I mean, it's never really cut and dried, and it depends on the ability or the experience of the diagnostician. What you tell them, or
Yes.
how you are on the day, or there's so many factors.
And some people fit very clearly into one diagnostic criteria, and some people just don't, because the diagnostic criteria are artificial boxes. They serve a purpose, but we don't fit naturally into boxes as humans.
We do not fit naturally, and just the number of overlaps it's just off the chart.
It's just clusters of symptoms, isn't it? That go, oh, we often see these together. Let's call it something. Yeah.
Symptoms and signs. Oh, we see these together. We've just thrown, a hunk of stuff at the wall and gone, oh, yeah, that's OCD. Really?
Yeah.
Look,
Yeah.
seriously, we need to be looking at the function of the behaviour rather than looking at.
Yes.
But there's a few reasons why intolerance of uncertainty is worse when there's multiple diagnoses. I mean, reason is the compounding effect, where each disorder contributes its own uncertainty-related challenges, right?
Yeah.
It could be increased cognitive load, so more symptoms to manage, more treatment decisions, more unpredictable aspects of life, just general overall complexity, which
Yes.
naturally increases uncertainty. And again, treatment complexity can play into that. Those with higher baseline levels of intolerance to uncertainty experience fewer gains in treatment. It's much harder to change it.
Yes, I read that. Yes.
Yeah. So, and of course, reduce coping capacity due to the multiplication effects of intolerance of uncertainty and emotional dysregulation. Like all of that impacts on why it might be worse, and then why treatment may not actually be that effective once you move on to treatment. Once you've identified it, then you move on to treatment. It's going to be harder.
Yeah. One PhD paper I read said that intolerance of uncertainty predicted difficulties with acquiring, discarding, and clutter. There was also a research paper that said there wasn't necessarily a link with clutter, but there was with acquiring and discarding. So it seems to definitely have a link with acquiring and discarding, and maybe with clutter. But even with that uncertainty, what is it about uncertainty that might make somebody more likely to keep hold of things or acquire new things?
Well, acquiring behaviours serve to avoid uncertainty about future needs. So you want to reduce the fear of missing out on an opportunity, right, or future capacity to acquire. Like whether that be financial, physical, or mental, you're worried about those things in the future. So, hey, I've got to acquire this right now because right now I can financially, physically, or mentally get hold of whatever it is.
It's reduced in price, or I've got a lift to the supermarket so I can get it home, or
Exactly. Or I've just remembered that I have a need for something right here, right now, and I've also got the money and I've had the lift, so I will buy it. All that kind of stuff is just, and also just not being able to think clearly quite often is just, I'm mentally foggy. I'm out. Gosh.
Do I need beans? I probably need beans. I'll get the beans because I'll probably need beans. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's just that, well, I certainly don't want to get home and not have beans. I mean, geez, that would
what
just
will
be...
I have on my toast?
How can I have breakfast tomorrow? Difficulty discarding protects against the uncertainty of making a wrong choice and preventing future regret. This protects us from the predicted shame of making a mistake. I mean, mistake making is kind of a shameful thing for many of us.
It shouldn't be, but it is.
It shouldn't be, but it is. Totally, it is. We feel this sense of shame. Well, I couldn't even make a decision right about that. People who hoard are constantly asking themselves, am I doing the right thing? Whether that is to do with sorting a loved one's possessions, should I be touching and moving this stuff? Will that loosen the ties to that person? Will I need this as soon as I decide to let it go? Will someone else have a need that I could have filled? That all of those
Am I
things
getting rid of it in the most responsible way humanly possible? There's so many things that we tie ourselves in knots about.
And just the more elements of that we put into the mix, the more uncertain we are, the more likely we are to just avoid the decision.
So I read in the paper by Castriotta about 2 subfactors of uncertainty. So factor 1 is uncertainty has negative behavioral and self-referent implications. And factor 2, uncertainty is unfair and spoils everything. Factor 1 was associated with hoarding severity, whereas factor 2 was not, which isn't surprising to me at all. I don't really think of uncertainty as unfair and spoiling. Well, it might spoil everything, but it feels like the way of the world, so not unfair. But did that surprise you? Because it didn't surprise me.
No, because the factor 1 focuses on how uncertainty leads to negative self-judgments and behavioural consequences, right? It emphasises that personal, internal impact of uncertainty on the individual. And this factor is more closely related to anxiety, likely due to that emphasis on negative self-judgment. The other one reflects like a more external philosophical stance, I guess, about uncertainty, that it's inherently wrong or unjust, that it's an external force that ruins experiences, which I kind of feel like is a bit more grandiose. Don't you think? It's kind of like poor me, and
also a bit childish as well.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't fair.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Stamping your foot because you can't have a nice lolly.
Exactly. And of course, as you said, factor 1 was associated with hoarding symptoms and factor 2 wasn't, and it just aligns with that Hoarding often, about fear of making mistakes and self-critical. It's a self-critical kind of anxiety-driven set of behaviours.
So back to that Elizabeth Weingarten interview that we mentioned at the start, she quotes poet Rainer Maria Rilke in 1903 as saying to love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. So the idea of almost relishing the questions rather than fearing the questions, and the questions meaning that kind of uncertainty, that feeling of uncertainty, it feels to me like it's got a lot of potential in changing our relationship to uncertainty, that rather than seeing it as something to fear, we can go, oh, do you know, I've just realised that Jan's going to bring curiosity into this answer.
Yes.
We can approach it with excitement and curiosity rather than dread. So does that make sense to you too?
All roads lead back to curiosity. My pet perspective. Yes.
That's the other thing in the drinking game. Jan mentions curiosity.
Yes. It does have, significant therapeutic potential. It's a fundamental shift.
It does, a bit like resentful journaling. I do a fair bit of resentful curiosity.
Exactly like resentful journaling and resentful curiosity, similar benefits. You're not looking at the uncertainty as a threat to be avoided or controlled. It's something to, we should be embracing uncertainty with curiosity rather than fear. It's a complete reframe for someone who hoards. Like, what if I need this later? Fear-based. To, I wonder what would happen if I let this go. Curiosity-based.
I
Hey?
wonder what I could use in its place if I suddenly did unexpectedly need this.
Exactly.
I wonder how creative I could get.
Creative I could get. Yes. Mic drop. That's exactly it. How creative. We're so creative. Like, we can.
Especially people who hoard.
The workarounds are like off the charts.
And also the immediate way in which if somebody says, why don't you get rid of this? We can think of 20 uses it suddenly has. I think that in itself is evidence of creativity.
So turning it on its head, right?
We can go, yeah, no, that broken thing could be used for all of these things. And so why don't we apply that same creativity to if I get rid of this and then later need it?
I know. We suddenly revert to, I have to have the exact tool. I need to have my grapefruit knife for when I want to have grapefruit segments for breakfast, when grapefruits are in season. I can't use any other kind of knife. That wouldn't work. It's at odds, the fact that we can be so creative about uses for something that, we fear we're going to lose. It's loss aversion again, isn't it? It's another cognitive bias, really.
Yeah.
We try to find ways to, make sure that we don't feel that distress of letting it go.
Yeah. There's also research from Nick Carlton at the University of Regina in Canada that as we use smartphones more and as just the internet takes over our lives, so has our intolerance of uncertainty has increased. And what Weingarten said about that was, of course, this is a correlation and doesn't necessarily indicate causation. However, Carlton suggests that having answers at our fingertips all the time means we are regularly missing out on opportunities to practice sitting with uncertainty. And like a muscle, this can atrophy our capacity for it. And I felt this, like, sometimes you're in a bar and you hear a song, and whereas 20 years ago we'd have just gone, oh, I wish I could remember who that song was by. But now I open Shazam, it tells me in 5 seconds who sang the song. That's a very minor thing, but 20 years ago I would have had to sit with that very minor uncertainty, and now I no longer have to.
Yeah, yeah.
So do you think this has relevance for people who hoard in any way?
Look, I know, like you, it impacts me every single day. I mean, I can't stop myself from checking my answers, like checking that I got the damn actor right when I recognise them. Shout out to IMDb every
IMDb every
time. My
time.
God.
And what else were they in? What did I see them in
What
before?
did I
Yeah.
see them in before? And then I go, yes, I'm a super recognizer. I did recognize the right person, even while they were wearing a costume. And they're
And the
20 years
last thing I
older.
saw them in was 1996.
And I remember what I was doing then. Look, I think it does. It's so, having it at our fingertips just means we are missing out on that practice of sitting with uncertainty. But I think also people who hoard want a backup of that information. So, it's almost like they've got the double whammy. They can find out straight away, but they also want to have some concrete evidence of that somehow.
Yes, we're talking in a future episode about trusting ourselves, aren't we? And this
Yes.
feels relevant to that as well.
Yeah. It's potentially, yeah, they could start wanting to screenshot everything, which it moves pretty easily from I search for it on IMDb and I want to remember that again. So I'm going to save the picture of it. It's just an
Yeah.
extension. So it could even be worse. I could even add another element to it. Extra ways of feeling uncertain and wanting to save that information.
Yeah, yeah. So as always, a lot of the research is into cognitive behavioral therapy. And also, as always, little of the research is about hoarding disorder. But we do know from the research that does exist that in anxiety disorders, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, can help people with intolerance of uncertainty. So it's feasible that it would help people with hoarding disorder too, but we don't know for sure. The PhD I mentioned earlier by Baldwin looked into a brief acceptance and commitment therapy intervention on intolerance of uncertainty to see if that would help people with hoarding disorder. It wasn't that conclusive, and it was tiny in any case, so it's difficult to build anything on that. But if people are looking into some kind of mental health treatment or therapy, and they're listening and they're recognizing that intolerance of uncertainty is actually a massive barrier for them, what is a good approach to take? Where can people start?
Look, I think I'm still pretty pro acceptance and commitment therapy and exposure based training and experience for a therapist. I think sometimes CBT, particularly cognitive restructuring and things like that, people with hoarding are a little bit like Teflon with that. It doesn't really change their thoughts. I think the key is finding someone you're comfortable with and can trust to come into your space and help you, because this work of increasing uncertainty tolerance is context specific. So you really need to look for someone who has experience teaching people to observe their error-related distress. If they're making a mistake, you need to have someone who can teach you to observe that without immediately acting on it. So trying to put some distance between stimulus and response. You want someone who has helped people increase their tolerance for the uncomfortable feelings that arise when mistakes happen and sit with that uncertainty rather than avoiding it. So someone who can do those things will be a good place to start. If you want to try some things on your own, I've got a few ideas, but first start with reframing mistakes. So again, relishing the question and view mistakes as learning opportunities rather than failures. Curiosity, shout out to just having another swig of the whiskey. Self-compassion, develop kinder internal dialogues about imperfection. Everyone is imperfect. We all have the same issues.
I did a whole episode recently about self-compassion. It's such a Yeah.
Yeah. And there's some new research around that, isn't there? Like you had someone on a little while ago. I can't think of her name. She was fabulous.
Yeah, I went to a 2-day conference about shame a few weeks ago, and the self-compassion episode basically came out of that.
Oh,
That the antidote to shame is compassion, and it really helped. Just sitting listening to people talk about how damaging shame is for 2 full days
yeah.
really cemented something in me that
Mm,
I was, and I say this in a non-shaming way, doing it wrong.
yeah. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
even I basically concluded that even if I didn't feel like I deserved self-compassion, I should just do it anyway, because even
Yeah.
if I just went, let's look at the evidence is that self-compassion works. And so whether I deserve it or not, because that was always what tripped me up. Do I deserve the self-compassion? I'm kind of trying to bypass, do I deserve self-compassion, and just go to self-compassion anyway.
Yeah. I mean, we need to flip, the shame from victims to the perpetrators in all cases. So that's another thing about self-compassion. We need to remember that it wasn't our fault. Whatever happened to us wasn't our fault. So self-compassion is huge. Values focus. Make decisions based on values, which again is another thing I bang on about all the time. But rather than avoiding all possible errors, am I moving towards, am I living in the life that I want to live towards those values that I hold? But gradual error exposure, I mean, systematically exposing you to situations where errors are likely or
Mm.
inevitable. I don't know what that might be for you. For some people, it might be actually just handwriting in a notebook. I've got so many clients who don't want to write in a notebook because they feel that it won't be perfect, or there'll be some error that will be made, and that's unforgivable. That will have ruined the entire notebook.
I deliberately left a spelling mistake in my to-do list recently.
So proud of you.
Thank you very much.
So proud of you. And you know what I did recently? I put a line through something that was wrong.
Well
Yes.
done.
I didn't get out the whiteout. I just did it. I just did it.
Well
That was
done.
wrong. That sort of stuff, it sounds silly, but we get hung up on that and we make such a big deal out of it.
And then we do it and nothing goes wrong.
Nothing goes wrong. Start with something low stakes, some mistakes, and gradually increase them. Like I did it today. Very proud of myself, putting a piece of paper, recyclable paper, in the bin, not in the recycling. And I didn't put my hand back in there and pull it out.
Well done.
Huge, huge step forward. Sounds silly, but I do it
And what it does,
every day.
yeah, what it does, it proves to us that the world doesn't collapse. And it means that next time we might be able to forgive ourselves a slightly worse mistake, and so on.
Exactly. Yep. Theoretically, it's going to help the brain learn that errors aren't catastrophic. That's what you're wanting to do.
There are catastrophic errors, but we're not talking about air traffic control. We're talking about putting paper in the wrong bin.
Yeah. And we're not talking about making a beef Wellington
We're not with poisonous
with poisonous
mushrooms,
mushrooms.
with Jan's relative giving evidence in the case.
Some distant relative with the same surname as mine. Yes.
If you've no idea what we're talking about, there's been a high-profile trial that Jan and I have been mutually obsessed with for a while, where someone poisoned, and we can say this because she was found guilty,
She was.
poisoned her extended ex's family with
Mm,
beef Wellington.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, everyone listening to this podcast will know all about it.
Surely.
Surely, come on, surely they'll have all of their pet ideas on how it went down.
But even if we're a brain surgeon at work, when you really
Mm,
don't want to make a mistake, that still doesn't apply about not using the whole onion before you throw it away.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, experiment. Look, this is the one that you got to build up to. But throwing out items without checking them thoroughly, maybe just throwing out the newspaper into the recycling without looking through everything to check to see if you've read it all or to check that you haven't left a piece of paper in there or whatever. Just give it a try. Test your window of tolerance by making those small, potentially imperfect decisions. And the other one is gradually changing rigid rules, about your waste and mix is a big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But don't forget, we're all different. I mean, some people have more sensitive, error detection systems because of genetics or trauma or other factors. So we need to kind of think about that when we're looking at interventions and tailor them to individual tolerance levels and that kind of thing. But yeah, you may find that this is something that you think is central and you might need to seek out some professional support with it. But you can give this stuff a go on your own. It's something that you can actually focus in on and become more aware of, even if you're not looking to change it initially. Just start noticing. So I actually had, this is many, many years ago, I actually had a client when I was doing my counselling training, and I was about to go into the session with her and I had a cup and I put it accidentally in the recycling. And I went in with my hand and pulled it out. And she said, you don't have to be perfect all the time. And I just and I think about that often. I think about her saying that often.
Yeah.
You're right. I don't have to try to be perfect all the time. We don't, because we're not.
Nor would, if I can't think of anything more boring than spending time with perfect people.
Oh, me too. In perfect houses where you can't touch anything or do anything. Oh my God. Just people don't want you to be perfect. Just remember that. They want to come into your home and feel relaxed and comfortable and think, oh, she's just like me.
A friend of mine recently, in a big Microsoft Teams meeting with important people from across her city, all in this Microsoft Teams meeting, she put something in the chat with a devastating typo that made it sound very rude.
Oh.
And she sent this to, the great and good of her city council, basically. And then realised what she'd done. And she took a photo of her screen and messaged me and was like, oh my God, I can't believe I've just sent this. And she immediately apologised. And she was mortified. But what I said, and I meant this, was that for everybody else in the meeting, a probably boring meeting just got fun. Because what was a probably boring meeting, due to her typo, became funny. It became something you're going to tell your partner about when they get home. And so, sure, she was mortified, but her mistake will have cheered at least 10 people up.
It's cheered me up.
Mm.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Throw a few of those, few more of those into the chat. Thanks. Good on her.
So make more mistakes. It's good. It's good for the people around you if you make mistakes.
Make more mistakes. Yep, I agree.
I enjoy making this podcast and it helps me on a personal level. It's a lot of work, but the feedback I get makes it worthwhile. I fund everything about the podcast myself. So if you want to help to ensure the future of the podcast, you can help me to cover the costs by sending a one-off or recurring donation at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/donate. So, back to the Weingarten interview. She says the four most important elements for people who are able to change their relationship to the questions in their life and to the uncertainty they experience, the 4 C's: curiosity, conversation, community, and commitment. I like these. Can you talk us through how we might do better at incorporating those into our lives?
Okay, well, curiosity, I've flogged a dead horse there. I may literally have flogged a dead horse. But relating to the uncertainty in your life with more curiosity than fear. I wonder why I feel this way about letting go of this item. Considering those sorts of questions as you're working through and trying to get a handle on why this uncertainty is so intolerable. Conversation. With the right techniques, we can use conversation to help us create a sense of safety and security, allowing us to sustain curiosity rather than that spiraling into fear. So we could discuss uncertainties with trusted others rather than avoiding them. Have a chat with someone else about a particular thing that you've been avoiding and see if you can work through that in a safe space. Community. I was going to say we're a pack animal. That sounds a bit harsh, but we're all about community, and it evolved to help us feel safe and secure. So it shouldn't be surprising that a key feature of being able to love the question is using social support around us to explore the uncertainty. I think that's another thing. We just push it aside. I'm uncertain, I won't make the decision. But if we were to explore it a little bit more, particularly with others that we feel safe with, we might kind of uncover some of the reasons behind it, but also maybe dispelling some of the myths about why we think it's not the right decision or it's a mistake. Commitment and acceptance and commitment therapy. The whole thing, curiosity, all of this stuff is related to ACT. We need to commit to the process of exploring our questions while observing which ones are no longer worthy of our attention. Dedication to the process of exploring questions while learning when to let them go. Most difficult for our audience, I think, is learning when to let things go.
Both physical things and ideas and thoughts and
Yeah. Really hard, really, really hard, but it's definitely, but the whole, like we've discussed that idea that humans are wired to reduce uncertainty, because we're, when we navigate that, it requires more metabolic energy. But if we approach uncertainty with curiosity, we can make this energy expenditure actually feel worthwhile rather than draining, transforming the uncertainty from an energy drain into an energizing kind of exploration of what's happening. This shift, from that fear-based avoidance to curiosity-based engagement could fundamentally change how someone who hoards experiences the decision-making process around their possessions, potentially reducing the paralysis and avoidance that maintains the behaviours. If we can flip that, make that shift, a lot of stuff that we need and want to do is about a shift. And that's kind of uncertain and scary. I get that. But we have to kind of explore that because growth and change is inherently uncomfortable, isn't it? I know you've been talking a lot about that lately, and I really resonate with that because it is really hard.
It is really hard.
It's really, really hard. But you're doing a good job. Everyone's doing their best.
That's it. It's really hard, but it reaps rewards.
Yes.
And that's the bit. Also, this sense that staying the same we think is comfortable and it isn't necessarily.
Yeah. Especially when everything's kind of moving and changing around us.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that we kind of pop our heads up and go, oh my goodness, this is a completely different world to when when I went into my shell. Now I'm coming out and I'm looking around going, holy moly, everything's changed.
Yeah. So, Jan, it is time for the extra question. I need you to pick a number between. This is the bit where I ask guests an extra question. It's sometimes a slightly silly one, and Hoarding darlings get access to this extra question and the answer. If you would like to become a Hoarding darling, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/darling. Okay, back to the podcast. So, Dr. Jan Eppingstall, if people want to find you online, if they want to find out a bit more about you or get in touch or see what you're up to, what is the one best place to do that?
I think head on over to the website. Go to stuffology.com.au and feel free to just browse around. I'm getting ready to do a refresh of my website. So any feedback, I'd love that. That'd be great. But yeah, just come on over there. You can email me from there. You can comments there.
Marvellous.
Whatever you would like.
Fabulous. So, Jan, thank you very much. That's been really interesting. I really think that this uncertainty thing it's so core to so many aspects of hoarding disorder. It kind of permeates all the different factors, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think this is a really core issue.
Yeah. And I just, after doing, a deep dive there, I kind of found some things that I thought I could incorporate myself. So
amazing.
Definitely very worthwhile. And thank you. May we take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we record and listen to this podcast today. I am speaking on the lands of the Boon Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I acknowledge their connection to country, both land and sea, and culture. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today.
It's the bit where that hoarder shouts out someone wise.
So shout out this week to friend of this very podcast, Paige Pritchard, talking on her own podcast, the Money Love Podcast. Have a listen.
I feel like 80% of the time, in most instances, for most people, we already have what we need. Going back to the running example, most of us already have a pair of tennis shoes and most of us already have clothes that we can wear running. It's like you don't need to go out and do all the aspirational spending and get all of the new things. Just start running, because the running, the activity, is how you're actually going to develop your identity as a runner. Having an Apple Watch and a new pair of tennis shoes, that does not make you a runner, nor is it going to help reinforce your identity as a runner. So use what you have. And if you don't have it, try to borrow one from a friend. I think between what we already have and then being able to borrow things from other people, that should really cover 95% of use cases of things that we would need.
Okay, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. You can find all the links I've mentioned and a transcript of the episode online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to the podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes. There may be links in this podcast that earn me money. This doesn't come at any extra cost to you if you make a purchase through those links, and it helps to support the podcast. So, today, sorry, how do I lose my point on the page when it's at the top?
I don't know.
This is a good sign. Okay.
Yes.
Which is a concept. Blah, blah, blah. My Instagram algorithm thinks I've been dumped. I'm getting all the let them go, you'll be all right without them content. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know what I don't know what I clicked on that made it go, this is someone who's just been dumped. But I haven't been dumped, for the record. All is good.
All is good.
You can't be dumped when you're single. It's really hard to dump a single person. So Instagram's got it wrong this time. So there's a phrase that, oh no.
Capacity due to the multiple, the multiplicative,
The number at the same time,
the number
multiplying. Just go multiplying, that would work, actually.
Multiplying effects of...
or stick with multiplicative.
Multiplicative. So, reduce coping capacity due to the...
Multiplying works, I'm sure.
Multiplying. Reduce coping capacity due to the multiplication effects of...
That'll do.
God,
that makes sense.
That'll do.
Makes more sense than multiplicative.
It makes more sense than multiplicative. So reduce coping capacity due to the Say it now.
Couldn't say it before either.
Reduce coping capacity due to the multiplication effects of intolerance.
You got through multiplication and then couldn't get past of.
No, I didn't know what I was going to say next. Reducing coping capacity due to the multiplication effect.
So one PhD paper I read said that every time I see IU in the notes, I think of IUDs.
D.
Yeah, I should have written it out. Intolerance of uncertainty. I don't know what... All right. So, Dr. Jan Eppingstall, thank you very much. First of all, no, I do that afterwards. Sorry, I need to maximise my screen and my controls have disappeared. There we are. So